The following is from stationery found in someone's old family archives. It is a letter written from a John Tapscott to a family member known only as Norman. Dear Norman, I must tell you of an incident that occurred yesterday, February 7th. I may be forever distraught by the events of this day. The chill of the night was biting as I guided my buckboard wagon down the rutted path leading away from town. It had been a successful trip, but dusk was deepening into an inky blackness, urging me to quicken my pace. My horses, sensing my urgency, tossed their heads and whinnied softly, their breath clouding in the cold air. The road was familiar, a path I had traversed countless times, yet tonight it seemed cloaked in a peculiar, unsettling silence. Suddenly, a rabbit darted from the underbrush, spooking the horses. They reared up, nearly tipping the wagon before bolting down an unfamiliar path. My heart pounded in my ears as I struggled to regain control, shouting and pulling hard on the reins. After what felt like a lifetime, the horses calmed and the wagon rolled to a stop beneath the looming boughs of ancient oaks. I sat for a moment, collecting my thoughts, the only sounds being my labored breathing and the horses' snorts of distress. Then, slicing through the night stillness, came a distant scream, a human scream, twisted with fear and agony. My eyes widened and my body shivered. Compelled by a mix of fear and concern, I grabbed a lantern and ventured towards the source. The trees seemed to close in around me as I walked, the ground soft and uneven underfoot. As I crept closer, another scream rent the air, more desperate than the last. I quickened my pace, heart hammering against my ribs. Emerging into a clearing, I beheld a sight that stopped me dead. A group of figures, clad in robes and grotesque animal masks, stood around a bound figure. Torches in their hands cast flickering shadows and painted the scene with an otherworldly glow. One of the figures raised a knife, its blade catching the torchlight as he began chanting in a guttural tongue. They hadn't noticed me yet. I was about to retreat when a twig snapped under my foot. Heads turned, eyes glinting behind masks. The chanting stopped. Panic gripped me, and I turned and ran back to my wagon, the echoes of their sudden, savage shouts spurring my frantic escape. As I reached my wagon, I unleashed the horses and leaped onto the driver's seat, whipping the reins fiercely. The wagon lurched forward just as the masked figures emerged from the woods, mounting their own horses to give chase. My heart was a drumbeat in my ears, the wagon wheels thundering against the ground. Just as they gained on me, shadows emerged from the opposite side of the road. A lynch mob, their faces twisted in rage, armed with guns and shouting curses. They hadn't come for me. They had come for the masked figures. Gunfire erupted, the night exploding with the sounds of chaos. I didn't look back, focusing only on the path ahead, urging the horses to their limit. By the time I reached the safety of my homestead, dawn was breaking, casting a pale light over the land. I was safe, but seriously troubled. The images, smells, and sounds of the night's horrors replaying in my mind. The next morning, the local newspaper confirmed my fears. The ritual had been interrupted by townsfolk who had suspected the group of foul play for months. Some of the masked group were apprehended, others lay dead. The article hinted at dark practices and missing persons, a sinister undercurrent that had run through the town unnoticed until now. As I set the paper down, I shivered, despite the morning sun streaming through the window. Last night, I had come perilously close to an unholy evil that prowled beneath the surface of our quiet community. I was safe, yes, but forever changed by the knowledge of what lies in wait when the sun goes down. Truly yours, John Tapscott, February 8, 1899. This story was discovered as a letter to an editor at a local newspaper, Hoyle Shoemaker, Bamberg, South Carolina, December 23, 1901, to Mr. L.M. Schotter, Bamberg Herald. Dear Sir, The following is the story you requested regarding my experience we discussed in town yesterday. The year was 1899, and darkness was a mantle that draped the countryside with an uneasy stillness. I was making my long trek back home from the town market, my path illuminated only by the dim glow of a lantern and the occasional flicker of starlight piercing the canopy of trees. That evening, a hint of adventure whispered in the air, compelling me to take a supposed shortcut I'd heard whispers about but never dared to try. This side path, less trodden and thick with overgrowth, promised a quicker route home. Curiosity, as much as the desire to shorten my journey, nudged me forward. As I ventured deeper, the woods grew denser, the path narrower, and an eerie silence settled around me, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the dry leaves. After what felt like hours rather than the promised shortened time, a glimmer of light through the trees caught my desperate attention. I approached cautiously, finding a large, tattered house that looked as though it had been clawed out of a nightmare. It was dilapidated, with shuttered windows and a crooked chimney from which smoke lazily curled. As I stood there contemplating my next move, the door creaked open, revealing two figures. One was a tall, gaunt man with a beard that seemed to catch the shadows, and the other a stout woman with eyes too bright for the dim light. "Lost your way, traveler?" the man asked, his voice smooth like oil on water. "I thought this path would lead me home quicker," I replied, clutching my lantern a bit tighter. "Why don't you come in for a bit? Have some warm tea before you brave the night again," the woman suggested with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something in my gut screamed that this was wrong. The isolation of their home, the way the light seemed to avoid touching it fully, and the too keen glint in their eyes. "Thank you, but I must be getting on," I managed to say, stepping back towards the woods. "There's no path around here, lad. Come in, we insist," the man said, his tone hardening, stepping towards me. I turned and fled into the woods, hearing their footsteps pounding behind me. Panic lent speed to my legs as branches whipped past, tearing at my clothes and skin. In my frantic escape, the ground suddenly gave way beneath me, and I tumbled into darkness. I lay there for a moment, my body aching and cold, before noticing a putrid smell. Horror gripped me as I realized I was lying atop a pile of bodies, their stages of decay varying from fresh to barely recognizable. I retched, the reality settling in like a cloak of terror. Somehow, I climbed out, driven by sheer survival instinct. I ran without direction until rough hands grabbed me, dragging me back to that nightmare house. The couple bound me with coarse rope, throwing me into their cellar, a dark hole that reeked of mold and worse. Hours passed, or perhaps it was days. Time lost all meaning in that dark place. Despair nearly consumed me, until a faint glow from above stirred some sliver of hope. Smoke began to seep into the cellar, carrying the distinct crackle of fire. The house was burning. Summoning every ounce of strength and desperation, I writhed and twisted, the ropes cutting into my skin until miraculously they loosened. I clawed my way up the cellar stairs, the structure around me groaning and spitting flames. The fire was a ravenous beast, consuming everything in its path. I burst out into the night, the cool air a shocking contrast to the heat behind me. The house was an inferno, a pyre that lit up the night. I didn't stop to look for the sinister couple. My only thought was escape. By the grace of some divine providence, I found my way back to the road by the light of the burning house. My home, when it finally came into view, never looked more welcoming. I learned later that the couple was known to the local authorities, suspected for a string of disappearances but never caught. Their deaths were a mystery to the town, the fire deemed an accident, though I knew better. As I write this, recalling that night still affects my sanity. The road less traveled, I learned, is less traveled for a reason, and sometimes the darkness hides more than just shadows. Very truly yours, Hoyle Shoemaker.